to our show this morning. Welcome, Eric and Anita and Rosanna. Happy Friday, one and all. We got a lot to talk about this morning. First of all, big victory in New York. The seat that was occupied, the infamous, famous Mr. Santos, won by Democrat, Mr. Swazi. I had to look up how to pronounce the name. Swazi. Then we're going to have a ceasefire update. We're going to be talking about housing inequality in the United States in recognition of Black History Month. And then we're going to be talking about the impact of Black history on country music in the form of Beyoncé crossing over. Uh, I don't think it's the first time she's crossed over, by the way, into the country genre. Is that what you call it, Anita?
Mhm.
Uh, and uh, and then we're going to end talking about our pre-convention discussion. But first, big victory in Queens and Long Island. Anita, Swazi defeated his rival. 8-point victory, a harbinger of things to come. No?
We hope so. I think people are really fed up with the lack of action taken, and I think that's a theme throughout the show today is the Republicans' inability to make policy that will really help people's everyday lives. And I think there was some frustration with Trump's treating the border as a tool for him to win re-election, um, stopping that bill from passing. So I think people are pretty fed up, and it seemed it's too bad. Well, the opponent, she's a registered Democrat. I guess she didn't offer that much of an alternative. And he was a trusted guy. He had the seat before. He's been on the county board or whatever. So I think it's a good sign overall.
She was a Republican, though, I think.
She ran as a Republican, but she's a registered Democrat.
Oh, interesting. Very,
Mhm.
very, very interesting. In any event, this is in keeping with a series of special and off-year elections going back over the last year where MAGA candidates are going down. And it's symbolic because this district was redistricted. And in Queens, Swazi got a big vote, and also in Long Island, not as big, but enough to win. Rosanna, in case anybody, for all of our listeners who are paying attention, even early on in this election campaign, um, there is the ongoing specter of a shift even further to the right in U.S. foreign policy. I don't know if you remember the Blackwater Corporation and the name of Eric Prince. Well, this joker now is going around talking about, in order to check this out, and I'm not making this up, in order to solve the immigration crisis, we ought to recolonize Africa, recolonize Latin America, recolonize Asia. Go, I mean, just open white supremacy, colonial. I mean,
Well, he can try all he wants, but I remember the words that Cesar Chavez said about that once you educate a population, you can't uneducate them. And I don't think that we're in the era where people are going to be allowing themselves to be recolonized. So I think he's, barking up the wrong tree.
barking up the wrong tree, Eric. Open. colonialist imperialism. Eric,
It's
can't
barking up
hear
the
you.
wrong.
Now we
It's
can.
it's barking up the wrong tree, but it's also in a context of growing uh, fascist disregard for the uh, the will of working people. So he's uh, in the discussion that you're talking about. Um, Prince was just talking about how the world needs leaders uh, like strong men that are going to hold. And there is just such an anti-democratic disregard for human participation in the building of their society, and it's just wrong. And it's wrong um, from the perspective of white supremacy. It's white supremacy in action. It's wrong from the perspective of the fact that he has no regard for the will of the people. He just assumes that everything is wrong and that everybody's just waiting for somebody like him to come along and fix it with his mercenaries and his weapons, and that is the way that you fix things in the world, and that has to be totally rejected, along with the idea that we have to maintain our military budget, which has got to be cut, so that we can take some of that money and use it for addressing the needs of people. And
Isn't
he is
he
just
from the DeVos family uh,
Mhm.
he
in Michigan, Anita? I mean,
Right. Yeah, he's
wasn't that Trump's Secretary of Miseducation?
yeah, miseducation is exactly right. Yeah, I think that's her brother, right? I think
That's the brother,
um
yeah.
right, right.
That's
Yeah,
the
the whole
brother.
family is Amway money and just very corrupt, very anti-working class, the whole family.
When we talk about fascism as being the open terroristic dictatorship of the most reactionary sections of finance capital, that's who we're talking about.
Mhm.
That's who we're talking about. You know, these families, Amway, DeVoe, they they divided Africa in Berlin, 1883, in that conference. The British took Nigeria, Ghana, the French took Senegal, Ivory Coast, you know, the Belgians took the Congo, the Germans took Southwest Africa, now called Namibia, you know, uh, the Dutch took South Africa and the British. And for 100 years, misrule, exploitation, now neo-colonial exploitation. And they think that they're going to go in there and do. I don't think so. Rosanna's right. Ain't nobody gonna. But this is what we're facing. Uh, but the people of Gaza are facing direct colonialism and now genocide as Israel pushes south into Rafah. Um, 30,000 people killed, 12, 13,000 children. And Netanyahu says it's to save civilization, Rosanna. What civilization? This is Lieutenant Calley. Remember him from Vietnam? We had to destroy the village in order to save it. I mean, this is how these fascist minded people think. But back home, well, still in Israel, the Israeli Jewish people who have the courage to stand up against it, like Ofer Kassif, 3 days from now, the Knesset is going to vote on whether to expel him. Why? Because he supported South Africa's petition in the International Court of Justice charging genocide in Gaza. And they call that treason, Rosanna.
That's fascism.
We call it justice. I mean, well, we'll see whether or not the vote goes through because some of the people in the Knesset are saying, well, we don't like it, but it's not enough to expel them. So we're going to see what happens. Back home here, 68 members of Congress have now come out for a ceasefire supporting Cory Bush's resolution. There have been 70 resolutions put forward in city councils. Of them, 61 or 62 have passed, calling for a ceasefire. On Tuesday, they had a big fight in Peoria that our YCL and Party Club was deeply involved in, debating the ceasefire. And the mayor is saying, Anita, that we're going to be neutral. We're
The mayor,
compassionate. We feel for the people, but how can you be neutral to genocide?
I guess that's the mayor of Peoria. I
Mayor of
hope he
Peoria.
Peoria, Illinois. Yeah, well, he's really he's the one barking up the wrong tree because I think the tide of opinion is really against what Israel is doing in Gaza and for really well, our hopes are with the international court. But I think this really shows what's going on in Israel right now is Netanyahu and his people are really digging in, and here they are trying to expel people who don't agree with them from the Knesset, members who were duly elected. So I think it's going to take more than Biden just giving mild criticism of Netanyahu. We have to really put all the power of the people behind the demand for a ceasefire. And I think we're moving in that direction with the changes in labor, and the number of people in Congress who are coming out for the ceasefire. Sadly, none of those people are from Ohio, despite our attention and our push for our elected officials and our cities and municipalities to endorse a ceasefire. So I think we just have a lot of work to do, and we have to make it stronger than ever because it's going to take Biden and the world being very strong to stop Netanyahu because he's really digging in right now. It's frightening.
Rosanna, Biden said that Netanyahu, Israel's policy in Gaza is, quote, a little bit over the top. That's what my mother said to me when I had a temper tantrum when I wanted to go out and play and she wouldn't let me because I didn't do my homework. Oh, you're being a little bit over the top. How can you call it genocide?
Yeah, I mean, how can you? How can you call genocide? It's disgusting. It's just disgusting, and it just. But we have to keep remembering that we still continue to put that pressure on because we see some steps forward. Even his comment about it's a little over the top indicates that we're having an impact because he's having to backpedal in some ways. So we can't let up on the pressure at all. We got to keep going.
We've got to keep going, keep the pressure on. In Fargo, North Dakota, the Human Rights Council passed unanimously a resolution calling for a ceasefire. There's a caravan on the march, Eric, started in Philly, 200 people marching from Philly to DC. They're going to arrive, started on Valentine's Day. They're going to arrive on the 21st of February. And our party and YCL members are going to join it, I believe, in Baltimore. And they're going to march from Baltimore along with the 200 all the way to the nation's capital. More power to them, Eric.
More power to them, and I wish I was marching with them. I'm so proud of of the comrades. I'm so proud of the people who are marching. This is the kind of thing that we need to see over and over and over. Everything can be turned into a way to protest and demand peace. And your feet are the best way of all. Just get out there and let yourself be counted.
Well, there was good news last week, which we talked about on Good Morning Revolution, when the AFL-CIO passed a resolution in support of the ceasefire. That was historic. That was huge, you know. And it came about because there was massive pressure from below, from the rank and file, from the grassroots, demanding a ceasefire. And I just heard the other day that in Minnesota, the state federation passed a resolution in support of the AFL-CIO's national resolution, and it passed by one. It was contested, you know, but it won, and that's the most important thing, Eric. Um, I think that let's move the conversation uh, to back home to these United States, uh, where we are celebrating Black History Month, and we're going to initiate a conversation this morning on some of the economic, social, and cultural, political circumstances facing African Americans, and one of the big issues is housing and homelessness, and the cost of housing, um, um, and the supply of housing, and there's not enough housing stock, and therefore the rents are going up. And Anita, the rents are going up because Wall Street, since the recession of when was that? 2008, 2007. They've been buying up. Listen to this. These predatory so and so's. They've been buying up housing stock in Black and Latino communities and renting it out, and
Mhm.
they're able to, Anita, purchase the housing stock because they created a circumstances where Black and Latino homeowners took what you call subprime loans, which had hidden clauses in them with escalating prices that the lenders knew that they couldn't pay back. And then when they foreclosed on the mortgage, they bought up the property at very low prices.
Mhm.
And now they're
And
taking
sometimes
that property and they're renting it.
sometimes they rent it to the original owners, which is just adding insult to injury. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what that Robert Reich article, I guess an op-ed somewhere, said was that Wall Street was doubly predatory, taking, making those housing, that housing unstable through the subprime loans, and then buying up the excess. And it's a huge problem. And I think, I mean, housing insecurity is the problem of our age. I think this year, I'm sure, is going to affect the election on what we do, because our government is not offering any solutions that are able to be passed, unfortunately. So yeah, you see this buying up. It's just another part of the process of capitalism. Finance capital gaining more and more control over people's homes and the housing stock, and just turning it into a commodity for profit for the very small number of wealth hoarders that are consolidated powers of finance capital. So it's a really scary situation, and there are policies that government could enact that would really solve this problem, forcing hedge funds and so forth to sell off the single family homes that they've purchased. But it doesn't look like that has a chance of passing, sadly, in this particular environment right now.
Rosanna, they knew exactly what they were doing. The mortgage companies and the big banks, they knew exactly what they were doing. They planned to do it. And then when it happened, they made bets on the fact that these properties were going to be foreclosed on. They made trillions of dollars as a result of it. Um, and then they sold these exotic bonds, um, which the other banks knew weren't any good, and because they knew that they weren't any good, they stopped lending. And they created a credit crisis, which then almost brought down the world economy. You remember that?
Yeah.
Lehman Brothers collapsed. All these big collapse, one after another. And Rosanna, nobody went to jail.
And
Um,
that's why we've got to build a big, strong people's movement to ensure that all of these corruptions and hoarders and um, greedy people really um, get get put in jail. They're the ones that really belong in jail. It's really disgusting that they calculated this way and took advantage of working people to just exploit them in that way. It's just horrible. It's disgusting.
it was the biggest wealth loss, Eric, in Black and Latino history. I mean, we because they in the monopoly capitalism today, and in their statistical analysis, they measure wealth by home ownership. That's one of the measures of home. You have equity in your house and all of that, and all of these families, and they just took it away, and it's never coming back. And on top of it, Eric, on top of it, that's why we say that racism is the Achilles heel of capitalism, because they almost brought down the world economy as a result. And then they had to bail the big banks out. Then they had to bail the auto corp. You remember they bailed the auto corporations out, and Rosanna, there was a movement that emerged. It's called Occupy Wall Street. Right after, remember that,
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're right. Yep.
Eric?
Oh yeah, Occupy Wall Street was very very active, and um, but I just feel compelled to mention that it's not just the single family houses that are getting bought up and turned into just commodities by these monopoly capital. It's also rentals, and that they're having a similar impact there, driving rental costs up and increasing the instability for people who are renting, and which is 58% of the African American community rents. So it's really important to remember the renters. And I also want to just mention that this is a repeat of a pattern that they've been doing over and over again. So when you look at how predatory lending goes, you can also look at things like redlining um, and other forms of exclusion of black and brown people from the market for housing, and it's just contributed to the wealth differential, to the inequity of the distribution of housing, and to the amount of exploitation that is going on, because there is no reason why people should have to pay more than half their rent, I mean, half their income for rent. And that's just inhuman, and it's just not right. And this whole thing can be changed with people's organization and people's demands.
Well, speaking of people's demands, Anita, let's make a little bit of a theoretical point here because we're in, you know, you can't solve a problem like this. This is where, here's the theoretical point. Anti fascist, all people's demands, also in the current moment, and actually for some time, have to be combined with anti monopoly demands.
Mhm.
Because the only way you're going to be able to stop these banks from engaging in predatory, I'm banging on the table. My producer told me, Joe, don't bang on the table. The only way that you can stop doing that is by nationalizing the goddamn banks.
Mhm.
You got to put it in public control, under public control. Anita,
That's right. You have to
we
put
got
it
to
under
take them
heavy
over.
manners.
Huh?
We have to take control of the banks. I agree. I mean, that's the finance, as we know from Lenin, that's the central um, engine of monopoly capital. I think we just do have to go. And that would be such a benefit to all working people if the banks were reined in and controlled by people's movements. So I agree. That's really hitting at the heart of monopoly capital right there. So I agree. I think and publicizing the damage that banks are doing to our lives is I think something that we need to focus on a little bit more.
If the Communist Party is not calling for the nationalization of the banks, we're not doing our job, Rosanna.
True.
We can't fight the ultra right without fighting for the nationalization of the banks. You know, I mean, that's the one of we have to put forward this demand in the pre-convention period.
Mhm.
You know, we can't be afraid to do that. Lenin put it this way a long time ago, Eric. He said, if we fail, can we advance if we fail to advance towards socialism? And the nationalization of the banks would be a step, a big one, in that direction. Am I wrong?
I think you're 100% correct, and I think that that's a key demand. And we have to understand that the banks are really part of a larger system of exploitation, and that whole system, the different pieces interact and intersect with each other to create the warlike, horrible conditions both at home and abroad that are destroying humanity and that are destroying the environment, and putting humanity, the human species, at risk of extinction. There's no other way of putting it. These people have to be stopped. These structures in our society have to be broken out and ended. And the Communist Party and the people's movements are making those demands, and we need to keep building unity and keep building organization on the ground to enforce those demands.
While we're talking about capitalism, since we're on the subject, let's talk a little bit about Beyonce. Beyonce is a business, and Jay Z and them, they have their business people, and they've made a crossover shift, and it's created a big uproar in country music. They're crossing over into country music, and some radio stations, we're not playing that music. And even one character, racist so and so, compared her to Beyonce to a dog. said they're pissing on trees, like marking their territory. Um, Good thing or bad thing for Beyonce to cross over into country music? Anita?
I'll weigh in on that because I have studied uh, music of the Caribbean, for example. When I first started studying that music of African American, Afro Jamaicans, and Afro Caribbean people, I was shocked to learn that the most popular singer at the time was Jim Reeves, a country singer from the United States. And there is a long history. If you go back to for instance, there's a great book by Richard Peterson called Inventing Country Music, where he shows that how the industry, the culture production industry, separated Black music from white music in order to better market it to white people. So it was country music as that white kind of music is really an invention. There's always been African Americans and Afro Caribbean people, people of African descent, involved in country music. And I see you have a banjo up there, which is an African instrument. So that's that I think is something that we really have to recognize. Beyonce is a pop singer, and she can do whatever she wants. I'm sure, she'll sell a lot of records and make a lot of money. Good for her.
Rosanna, good thing or bad thing? Beyonce crossing over in the country music.
I think it's a great thing. I think she has every right to sing, the songs that she wants to sing, and I think it's important to put the word out that country music has a basis in African American music and the jazz and all of that. So I think for us it's important to point that out because it's another attempt to isolate and it's another form of racism to isolate the music. Oh, this is your music and this is my music, which is false, and we have to reclaim that. We have to let let people know that it's a false narrative.
U.S. music is a coming together of African music and indigenous music and music from Europe and so on and so forth. I know your daughter plays that music from the countryside in Mexico that has
And it
African.
has an African base to it too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Eric, good thing or bad thing?
Great.
Crossover, Beyonce.
It's a great thing, and I think it really. I celebrate it. I think that building those kinds of bridges and uh, between different groups inside of this country is really, really important. But I also think that it has to be seen in the context of the erasure of Black contributions to history that's going on in some parts of this country, particularly like Florida and DeSantis, and the whole thing of not wanting to celebrate the contributions culturally and technically and in every possible way of Black people to the life and the culture and the joy that should be the American experience if we removed racism and we removed profit taking. Yeah.
Charlie Pride, country musician, African American, going all the way back 40s, 50s, 60s. You go up to the 60s and 70s. You remember the Commodores?
Hmm.
Lionel
Mhm.
Richie? They all had country influences, you know? Go back and listen to that. And then, there's a wonderful artist who is championing the uh, slave African contributions to country bluegrass and the Rhiannon Giddens. And she talks about how the banjo, one of the staples, is an African instrument, you know? So come on, people. This is part of our history. And why is the Communist Party talking about it? Because it's important for us to understand where this culture, it's a working class culture, endemic to the United States, which has now become people's culture. And we're not going to let no narrow minded racist people take it away from us. I'm saying that, and I don't even like country music. I don't. I mean, I recognize it, I have respect for it, but I'm not a fan. Who's your favorite country singer, Anita?
I like reggae music versions of country songs. Like Beanie Man has some great country songs, and that's what when I think of country, and I think of the great reggae artists who have crossed over long before Beyonce has.
Okay. Let's move the agenda. We're in pre-convention discussion, and there's a lot to talk about. Um, we have a pre-convention discussion document. It raises a lot of questions and points. Um, it started February and was going to go through May 31st formally. Informally, it's going to take place until the sounding bell of the convention. The first article we got was on the environment. Um, Eric, have you started your pre-convention discussion writing yet? Eric,
Good question.
what you waiting
So,
on, brother?
so I have been considering what I'm going to write about, and I think that there's a lot in the world and a lot that is changing, and that this convention that we're facing is also going to be a reflection of how those changes in the world are driving people to want to join the party and wanting people and pushing people to want to see fundamental change. And there's going to be a lot of questions that people have as to how do we enact that change and how do we um, win for victories for the working class. And I think if you look at 2023 and you look what happened with the rising of union activity and the UAW victory, the UPS victory, and others, smaller victories in places like small like coffee shops and things like that. It's like Starbucks. It's really important to understand that we're really in a fight back moment or uh, a moment where it could become a socialist moment of struggle. And I think that there's just a huge amount of questioning as to why it is that we have this ugly, horrible system and what can we do to change it. And I'm looking forward to participating in that discussion and seeing seeing the thoughts and ideas of people that are going to be contributing. Thanks.
All right. Well, you can write to us. Do we have an address where people should write to for the pre-convention discussion? You can
Discussion
write
at
to
cpusa.org.
discussion at
Uh-huh.
cpusa.org. Discussion
Yes.
at CPUSA. And you can write an article. You can write a letter. You can write a comment. You can send in a video contribution. You can send in an audio contribution. You can send a contribution of yourself smiling or frowning or at a demonstration. You know, we want to know what you think. And you don't even have to be a member of the party to participate in the conversation. We this is it's in particular important for the party members to help shape our policy, but we want to hear from others as well. What is your thinking? It should be a broad public discussion with a particular communist focus. And we're going to be covering the pre-convention discussion ongoing from now until the convention. So we hope to hear from you. And with that, Stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight, enjoy your country music, celebrate Black history, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Have a
Take
good
care.
everybody.